One of the statements we've got used to during this COVID-19 pandemic crisis, especially from government spokesmen, is we are following the science. And of course their hope is that following the science will make it possible for them to manage the crisis better. It will lead to proper and improved tests for the condition. It will lead to better treatments, and ultimately it will lead to an effective, safe vaccine against this virus. But at the same time, I find it sad as a Christian that people I meet can say following the science takes them away from Christianity. It disproves the claims that Christians make about Jesus, and in the end they believe that believing in Jesus is no better than believing there are fairies at the bottom of the garden. We are sad, deluded people. There are, and always have been, since the beginnings, Christians who were scientists, and they found no contradiction between their science and the discoveries they made there and what they knew to be true about Jesus. Just taking a name from the past, Michael Faraday, the man who laid the foundations for electromagnetism that we rely on today with our electricity generation and all the different electrical devices that we use without thinking about it day by day. But that's in the past. What about now? I'll name you a few names: Professor Stephen Taylor, Professor Andy McIntosh, Professor Stuart Burgess, Professor John Lennox. These are all men at the top of their field who are Christians and see no contradiction. I mentioned that Stuart Burgess name because you can actually go on to Google and hear his testimony written down there, and hear for yourself what it is, or see for yourself what he believes, and how he finds no contradiction between following Christ and being a scientist. In fact, those scientists would say that what science does is to open a window for them that enables them to see what a wonderful God we have, who created this universe with all its design features built in and holds it in being. When we use the phrase the science, it almost sounds as though here is something that does not change. That's far from the truth. If we look back over the history of science, it's been developing and changing as time's gone by, and occasionally there have been quite revolutionary changes. I'll give you an example. Just before 1905, the belief was that matter could not be changed. You could not create matter, you could not destroy matter. You'd always have the same amount. So for example, if you burn hydrogen in the air, it combines with oxygen, you get water. And 2 tons of hydrogen with 16 tons of oxygen will give 18 tons of water. It does not change. The mass is the same. So what happened in 1905? Along came Albert Einstein with perhaps what could be regarded as the most famous equation that's ever been stated. E equals mc squared. The energy is equal to the mass times the square of the speed of light. Now the speed of light is very big, about 186,000 miles per second, so even a tiny change in mass would release a lot of energy. And this happens not in chemical reactions, but it does happen in nuclear reactions. And that was really brought home to people when nuclear fission was discovered in the 1930s. That led to the development of nuclear weapons, and in 1945 we had Hiroshima and we had Nagasaki, and people had demonstrated to them just how things had changed. So it seems bizarre, incongruous to me, that people would use science against Christianity in a way that shows they've got a closed mind about this thinking. They should really be open to the evidence and not have a closed mind. Science is good at investigating some things, but not well equipped for others. Right at the heart of the Christian faith is the belief that on the 3rd day, after Jesus had been crucified and proved dead, put into a tomb, the stone rolled across, but on the 3rd day he was raised. Now, science could work out for you how much energy it would take to move that stone. Science can help to date some of the documents that have been written about that event. Science can also verify that when Jesus was on the cross and that centurion thrust a spear into his side and blood and water came out, that fits with what is known. But what science cannot do, it's not equipped to do, is to test the statements of those witnesses. We need a different approach. We need the approach that is used in a court of law by lawyers, or an investigative journalist, or a historian who looks at the documents, looks at the eyewitness accounts, and then reaches conclusions based on what they say. And that, when we use that approach with the story of the resurrection, people who started out as skeptics, believing that it couldn't be true, have been convinced by the eyewitness accounts and all the events of that time that go to prove in their mind that what Jesus said about himself was true, and that resurrection was true. And that's a vital part of the Christian faith. Paul said, if Christ was not raised, then we are of all men the most to be pitied. I've challenged you now, look at the evidence. Turn to the Gospel of John, read what he describes there. Apply those tests with an open mind, see if it does not fit with the facts. In other words, you cannot write off Christianity using science, quite the reverse.